Hi everyone.
Hi.
Nice to
Hi.
have such a big crowd tonight. It'll help, I think, if you have a Siddur, especially the one that we use. I'm going to be kind of referring to page numbers and things in there. Um, but yeah, why don't we do a blessing over study of Torah? And am I the host now, by any chance? Yes, I am. Yay. Okay, good. Because we're going to be doing some screen sharing, so I'll make sure I can share my screen. So hi everyone. I like to always begin with a blessing over a study of Torah. So if you want to either join me or do it on your own or say Amen or whatever works. So Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Amen.
We've got a good group here. Got a nice big group here. This is great. So we're going to be talking a little bit about the Seder, the Siddur, the order of the service that has been passed down to us. We're going to do this in two installments. We'll do some of it tonight, and then continue next week. Um, I just want to say hello and welcome to everybody here. Nice group. So the first thing is just acquainting ourselves with where this order came from, how long it's been around, and who came up with it. A man who was born with the name Amram ben Sheshna was later known as Amram Gaon. Gaon in modern Hebrew actually means genius. Uh, Gaon in modern Hebrew means genius. So if you hear somebody get called that in modern Hebrew, that's hopefully not sarcastic, and it's actually calling someone a genius. Um, Gaon in his day and age was the title is kind of like the Rosh Yeshiva or the head of the seminary. And so he died in 875. I couldn't find an actual birth year for him, but sometime in the ninth century. And so he was in Mesopotamia, and at the time he was kind of such a prodigy and such a up and coming superstar that the man who was the Gaon bestowed the title upon Amram even while he was still living and head of the yeshiva, head of the academy there. I believe in Pumbedita, because Amram, even while he has the title, eventually kind of it sounded to me like kind of went off and almost started his own branch of the Gaonet academies. Um, and so even though let's uh let's mute ourselves if we're not participating, but please do unmute if you have questions or comments. Please feel free to jump in. Um, and so he kind of went off on his own and got things started um, in Lower Mesopotamia in the Academy of Sura. So sometimes you hear about the Gaonid academies of Sura and Pumbedita, which are fun to say. In addition to being where the centers of study were for that the wisest Jewish minds, especially in time under Muslim control. So Amram wrote about 120 responsa. So what is a responsa? A responsa is, as you might answer, a response, an answer, but to a specific question. So as you probably know, we don't have a pope. We don't have a centralized one person or small kind of ruling class that determines for us what our prayers, what our liturgy, what our practices are. And so what would happen was a community or a representative of a community would write a letter, would write a question. I'm echoing back to myself. Um, they would send a question to their closest known authority, their closest gaon or posek is the other word, someone who can straighten out and answer questions of halacha. of normative Jewish law. And so they would say, for example, there's a practice of doing, of jumping up and down 6 times when we do the Amidah happening in White Plains, New York. Is this in accordance with the halakha? Is this acceptable? And and the posek or the gaon or whoever this authority was couldn't just say, yeah, or no. They had to, of course, give all of their proof texts and show their work and say yes or no, and here's why, here's how we know this. So that was what Amram Gaon was known for, is that he would be sent these questions, these kind of kind of stump the community question, or as we know, practices just come about, right? In different times and places and arise in different communities. And they once they take hold, there's a question of, okay, a lot of people are doing this, but is this really in accordance with what we're supposed to be doing? Does this actually work? So these rabbinic authorities would write responsa. And by the way, there are still responsa being written today. I mean, I know firsthand of the reform movement writing responsa to things like at the time when they wrote it, it was things like should a gay man or woman be allowed to be ordained as a rabbi or cantor, right? So even now, even in modern times, there are responses still being written because there's questions about what do we do, what is okay, what is not okay. And they will reach out to the local closest authority. Stuart, you unmuted. Do you have a question?
Yes. So you're saying in the 21st century, we have these cajones that the experts here that are doing that. We have that in the conservative movement.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure that there are post-Keem, meaning people who are very, very well versed in halakha and normative Jewish law.
And we just
And
recognize that. I mean, the Jewish community or
what was that? I mean, not everybody recognizes everything, right? I mean, reform responsa that says, what we would now refer to as someone who identifies as LGBTQ plus, the Orthodox movement as a movement, or movements, don't agree with that. So it's not this. I mean, that's, I guess, part of the trade-offs of not having like a pope is that the answer, especially now in modern society, those answers aren't binding upon anybody. But they are attempts, if you will, at exercising rabbinic authority to say this is okay, this isn't. And as we know, I mean, I think all the more so, maybe a series for next year is something I think about a lot, which is. And maybe I've shared this before, so I apologize if I'm repeating myself, but there's also nothing more Jewish than repeating yourself. Um, we as a people have only been kind of emancipated and quote unquote regular everyday citizens of this non-Jewish world we're living in for a relatively short period of time, right? If you go back to the emancipation in France in 1789, and as I shared that with somebody, and someone said, even more recently than that, when you think about how many of our ancestors lived in the Pale of Settlement and all these other horrible places, to be what Paul Mendes Floor of blessed memory would refer to as a Jew in the modern world, it's 150 years, maybe 200 years, right, that we've been part of this non-Jewish world. And my kind of amateurish thesis on that is that we're still adjusting to that. We're still figuring out, we're still relatively new to that ball game. Again, when you realize we've been around for a few thousand years, 150 years is a blip, right? I think we're still figuring out how to be Jews in a non-Jewish world. And responsa, tend to be something that I think actually could potentially play a larger role than it does. So I'm sure, and I'm going to do some more research after this, but I'm sure there are conservative movement responsa on certain topics, like these, where someone says, "This is happening in our community. Is that halakhically okay, or is that not?" Harold,
No.
no? Oh, I think
Sorry, I was just typing it. There are definitely conservative movement responsive.
yeah,
And,
yeah, I
and
think.
they've evolved even on the gay issue you brought up. But yes.
Yeah. So I think hang on, yeah, let me just say one quick thing and I'll come to you guys, David and Beth. Um, I think that did I just lose the train of thought? I might have. I do think that um, that each movement is trying to is the whole question is how do we be a Jew in the modern world, right? And I think we're all still figuring that out. The rest of that thought may come back to me. David and Beth, what do you got? No, you got to unmute. Can't hear you, Beth.
Sorry.
There we go.
Responsa. Oh, nice. Is responsa always written? Can it be oral?
They're always written because
Okay.
that's part of what makes them kind of an official response is that they're written down. Good question. Good question. So, Amram Gaon wrote about 120 of these, most of which were published in 1792 in Salonika in a collection called Shacharit, meaning like the gates of justice or righteousness. But his most famous responsum, in singular, is what we now call either Siddur Rav Amram or Seder Rav Amram, right? The order of the service according to Rav Amram. Because essentially he was asked, people are doing these prayers in this kind of order, and are they doing it right? And so he wrote a very lengthy responsum, giving the entire order of the service, at least as the way he knew it. And it was to the Jews of Al-Andalus. And Al-Andalus was what the Iberian Peninsula was known as when it was under Muslim rule, somewhere between like 700 and 1100 or something like that. So Al-Andalus, the Jews of Al-Andalus wrote a question to Rav Amram, and Amram came back with this entire order of the service as we know it today. There's a lot of potentially kind of misattributed things. There's kind of a blurriness at a certain point of what are the particular customs or updates that were kind of glommed onto and said in his name when it was really more modern commentators over the ages. But really, he was the one who's credited with the service, the order of the service, the way we know it. Let me pause there. Yeah, David, go ahead, unmute. Nope, there you go.
Makes the is the query that generates the responsum if who decides to put that question forward?
It's a good question. I mean, my sense is that it's whoever are considered the elders or the leaders within a smaller Jewish community. And my guess is if this was on behalf of the entire Al-Andalus, right, Iberian Peninsula, that I'm sure that there were some knowledgeable and wise leaders who would be the ones who would be able to, I think, also write it down, right? We can't assume that everybody is literate, but folks who were able to literally write it down, but also articulate the question that they're trying to get an answer to.
I mean, if a person goes to the rabbi and asks a shala, a question, and the rabbi gives an answer, is such and such kosher? Whether you like that, and the rabbi says no, you can't go against that edict. And that's why I asked whether it's an individual who will generate a question like that.
I mean, it's really on behalf of whole communities, whether it could be a small town, it might not be a huge Jewish community, but it's someone who's offering that question on behalf of whatever that community is, because being an isolated unit unto itself, they wouldn't have had the resources to go check the next town over or whatever it is. So they would just know that Amram or whoever it is the closest legal authority, right? Is the closest posek is the Hebrew word, and we would formulate our question together as a small community and send it off to the local rabbinic authority to say, is this all right or not? So I don't know that that's a great answer to your question, admittedly, but
No,
but
I
it's coming.
understand.
It's not just as far as I know. It's not just like an individual person like with a Dear Abby kind of letter. It's on behalf of a community where they're saying we're looking around and people are bowing 3 times before they do this, before they offer this prayer. Like, is that okay or is that not okay? Right. So oftentimes it's stuff that people haven't seen before, right? They don't have a reference for or a manual. They can't even look in the Torah and say, well, what does the Torah think? Because the Torah didn't imagine the specific situation that you're in.
Okay.
Other questions for now? Okay. So what I want to do tonight with the rest of our time is, let's see how I kind of split this up so that we can go over 2 sessions, but we'll see how it goes. Um, the first is giving you the overall like arc of the morning service. And as we'll get to, I think probably more next week when we get to the Shema and its blessings, and more in a deep dive, more specifically, we'll see that the themes are the same between the morning and the evening, but the prayers are different. So the topics that the prayers are addressing are exactly the same. For example, we have in the mornings we have Ahava Rabbah, like a great love, and in the evening we have Ahavat Olam, which is an eternal or an everlasting love. So the theme is the same, God's love, but the prayers are different because one's morning, one's evening. So we'll come back to that. But here we go. Now I'm going to try and share my screen and see how that goes. Okay. Okay. So now how do I move that stuff so I can see the screen? Okay. So this is kind of broad strokes of the sections in our service, okay? And we do these. We do these on Shabbat morning. So I'm going to be able to hopefully show you some page numbers of what we do and where we do it in the book already. Okay. So we have Birkot HaShachar. We have the blessings of the morning. Shachar is probably more literally the dawn, if you will, because we know that Boker is the actual word for morning. But Birkot HaShachar, the blessings of the dawn of the new day, and that's where the morning service is always, no matter what holiday it is, right, is called Shacharit. It comes from this word Birkot HaShachar, the dawn of a new day, right? The first service that you do after the dawn. And Shachar is also a very popular Israeli name, both for men and women. There's a lot of names that are used for both genders, which I think is very cool. And Shachar is definitely a popular Israeli name. And so these are the blessings of the morning. And that's actually where we start as well. And we'll go in, we'll do a deeper dive in a moment, but just giving you the overview. These are thanking God for all the things that we often take for granted and are grateful for, and our tradition forces us to be grateful, and that's where we start. Okay, we have Pesukei de Zimra, and that would be Aramaic, my favorite language. And by that I mean not really, but it's okay. Pesukei de Zimra is Pesukim or Pesukei Zimra, as might be in modern Hebrew. They are literally verses. That's a good translation there. Verses of song, verses of praise. So that is the second part. And that's real. Those are kind of I kind of describe those as kind of warming up, as kind of like the pre-gaming, if you will, the tailgating in the parking lot before we get to the main event, which at least in terms of the liturgy itself, not counting the Torah, because you can see it does build up towards the Torah service. And I don't think we're going to look too closely at the Torah service. I think we're going to have time to do, my plan is to do basically these two tonight, the Birkot HaShachar and Pesukei Zimra. And then with the full time next week, because I might give a 2-sentence recap on who Amram is, just for those who are here next week, but not tonight. But then we're going to dive right in and do Kriyat Shema Uvirchoteha, Shema and its blessings, or sometimes as and her blessings, because the possessive is in the feminine there. And the Shmona Esrei, the Amidah, the central part of our liturgy, which of course means 18, which is why there are 19 blessings, because Jews, right? Right? We got to have fun in there somewhere. So the central part of the liturgy, the Amidah, on weekdays, not on Shabbat, and we'll come back to that, are these 19 blessings that we call the 18 blessings, just for fun. And there's all kinds of, really quickly, there's all kinds of debates about why that is, that at some point maybe there were two prayers together that became separated. We like 18 as a number, so I'm sure they were like, close enough. We just call it 18. So they're in a full weekday service that's not Shabbat. You do these 19 benedictions, these petitions that we'll come back to. A moment of silent prayer, and then it really builds to the Torah service, as you might imagine. The Torah is the headliner, in this bill, this multiple act bill. And it's building up, and then we get to our reading and our chanting of Torah. Okay. And then after that, we have the concluding prayers, which I hope you can see, because I kind of can't, where all your lovely faces are. But the conclusion is Aleinu and Mourner's Kaddish and those things that we know kind of at the concluding part of our service. So it's not just a clever name. Let me just see what these notes are. Yeah. These are warm up. This is the actual call to prayer, right? Where Baruch Hu begins, and then this is the meat of the bones, so to speak, meat on the bones of what we're doing. Let me pause there and see if there are questions. And if I don't see you, just because I only see like 4 of you at a time, please just don't be shy, unmute yourself and jump in. Okay.
And just to clarify, Rabbi,
Yeah.
the Torah service is Monday and Thursday.
Yes, thank you. Yes, you're right. We don't traditionally read Torah on the regular days. We read Monday, Thursday, and Shabbat, and then holidays. And the reason, does anybody know the reason why we read Torah on Monday and Thursday?
It was market day.
It was the market days, that's right. So in order to ensure that there was a public reading or a public chanting, and that there was a crowd built in, and to make sure that they were, in a perhaps kind of what's the word I'm looking for, missionary, kind of thing of being able to bring it right to the people and have the scroll there and be chanting from it. So Monday, Thursday, and Shabbat, and then holidays is when we do Torah. Okay, now I'm going to stop the share for a second and pull up. What do I do with you? There we go. Okay. I know I'm not sharing right now. I'm going to pull up another slide. Okay, so first we go to Birkot HaShachar, and you're going to make me rotate that, aren't you? Okay, let me just pull this up. And we'll rotate it so you don't have to turn your face sideways to look at it. We're going to dive into Birkot HaShachar, to the blessings that we offer first thing in the morning. No, I don't want to try all these different things that you're trying to sell me on. Okay, turning it the correct way. And how did I do full screen? There we go. Okay, now that we're full screen, although that doesn't really help you so much, we're going to zoom a little bit. No, that's too big. Okay, I think that's a little bit better. Okay, so now we're going to try sharing again. And we're going to look at Birkot HaShachar. Here we go. Okay. How do I get back to full screen? Okay, that's a little bit better. I know there's a lot of small print here. Let me just bring this down a little bit so we can get all of these things. Okay. Okay, so if you'd like to follow along, you can take out your Siddur Sim Shalom, and it's the Harlow edition as it's known. So it's a little easier to see. Okay, so we begin in our prayer book. We're on page 2, where the first thing we do when we wake up is we thank God. We thank God. We say, so if you've ever sung or read Modeh or Modah, right, for a female, Modeh ani lefanecha. Modeh is connected to Todah, right, to thankfulness. I'm grateful. I'm thankful before you, Melechai v'kayam, king and ruler, enduring ruler. Shehechazarta bi nishmati bechemla. Right? So that literally means who has returned or restored my soul to me in compassion, in goodness. Right? So the idea, the belief is that as we go to sleep, to sleep means that we are entrusting our souls to God, and God, if we are so lucky and blessed, puts our souls back into us, and that is when we wake up. So modeh ani, modah ani, words of gratitude right away. If you're looking at page 2, there's a blessing for the washing of hands, right? And then matovu. Matovu becomes this first total expression in theory of what we do together as a kahila, as a minyan, preferably. More words of gratitude. How wonderful are how wonderful are your tents, O Jacob, your dwelling places, O Israel. The two first blessings that we did about modeh ani and the washing of hands might have been done at home. Actually, a bunch of these might have been done at home initially, but then not so much. And so there's something I think about we do this blessing for washing of hands, comes before we're able to all pray together. So, maybe they were just way ahead of COVID, but, wash your hands, right? The other thing I really like about Matovu, among other things, is, as you might know, who is the one who utters the words that are now Matovu? Anyone know? It's Balaam. Balaam, if you might remember, in Parashat Balak, I always do Balak and Balaam. Parashat Balak, Balak is the king of the Moabites, and Balaam is known for the power of his words and how whoever he blesses is blessed and whoever he curses is cursed. And so he's now a prophet for profit, as I like to call him. And the king, the Moabite king, Balak, hires Balaam to offer sacrifices, build a shrine, and curse the Israelite people, right? And each time he opens his mouth to curse the Israelite people, only the most wonderful and most beautiful of blessings. So there, I like, among other things, I really like the idea that this opening blessing that we offer together, it's the first thing we do, isn't even said by a Jewish guy. It's a Torah character, but it's not somebody who's Jewish. So maybe that's another series too of those who are not identified as Jews, and their impact on both on the Torah and its stories itself, but also onto our tradition.
Rabbi,
Yes.
I'm sorry.
No, don't apologize. That's what we're here for.
So we start on page 10. Is that what you're saying?
Right now, I'm looking at page 2. But you're right.
But in the synagogue, we start at page 10.
Yes, because there's kind of there's a, I don't want to necessarily an assumption, but I think there's the idea that a lot of these are private and personal and individual, and that in theory you've woken up and you've said Moda Ani, you've maybe sung Matovu, although probably not. There's other things in this part of the service that are also kind of assumed or hoped to be done at home privately before you get there, including where we start. I just want to see if there's anything else I wanted to point out. Okay. So there's the blessing on the bottom of page 2 for putting on the talit. It's on the top of page 4, but there's an introduction kind of thing there. There's meditations before putting on the tefillin and the blessings for that. That's page 4. And on to page 6. There's a rendition of Adon Olam is right here on page 6. And so that's sorry, Adon Olam. We're establishing the foundation, right? God is eternal. Adon Olam. God is the Lord and ruler for eternity, right? Olam literally means world, but as an adjective meaning eternal, right? For as long as the world has been there. On 6, there's Asher Yatzar, which speaks of the creation of the body, right? Asher Yatzar Hadam b'chokmah, who created mankind, humankind, in wisdom. And it says, Uvara vo nikavim chalulim, which is, pipes and openings and arteries and our internal human plumbing system. And the rest of it is, galui ve'yadui, we know that if one of these openings were to close or one of these closures were to open up, we could be in real big trouble, right? And we know that from health, right? We know that there are things that are supposed to stay closed and there are things that are supposed to stay open. And it's really thanking God for the basic plumbing of our body. And I remember learning that and kind of, almost like people around us kind of snickering of like, really, that's what we're talking about here? We're talking about like arteries and veins and, bladder and things like that. But it's like, if you've ever had any kind of illness, where you've been in a medical situation and you've been in some kind of condition where it was difficult to do that, or it was almost impossible to do that. I know, like, I have unfortunately experienced kidney stones, and it's like, all you want to do is go to the bathroom and you can't, right? So it may seem kind of silly to some of us, but really it's not, of starting with God is eternal and God gave me this body, right? So you can see that the prayers are in an order that makes sense, right? Among other reasons why is because they didn't, most of our ancestors weren't necessarily literate, right? So to be able to have some kind of either mnemonic device or way of thinking about it, to go, okay, we established God. Okay, what's the next thing? Okay, we're going to thank God for our bodies because our bodies are working, right? So you can see how these things kind of naturally progress. The bottom of 6, we have Birkot HaTorah. Why do you think we would say a blessing over Torah before we pray? Why might that make sense? I can't see everybody, so please, you can just jump in if you have an answer. The answer is because a whole lot of what we're about to say in our prayers comes from Torah or from Tanakh, right? It comes from our traditions, that someone has, that different sages throughout time have plucked this verse or this section of a psalm or this this part of this section of verses from Torah and said that this is important, right? So even though it might seem like, well, we're praying, we're not doing Torah, it's kind of like, well, a whole lot of the words of the prayers are from Torah. So it makes sense that you would say a blessing over Torah, then that's the origin of so much of our prayers. Okay, let's see what else I'm missing. On page 8, it says, if you have your book in front of you, it says a passage from the Gemara. And it says, Elu divarim she'adam ochel perotehem ba'olam hazeh. You can sing this Elu Devarim She'ein Lahem Shiur, which means that there's nothing that surpasses them in value. And this is a list that some of us are familiar with. Maybe some of us did this praying, where you'd say, אלה דברים שאין להם שיעור, שאדם אוכל פירותיהם בעולם הזה, והקרן קיימת לו לעולם הבא, which means these are things that a person metaphorically eats of the fruit of in this world, but their reward for it is in the next one, right? Ve'elu hein is, and this is the list of them, right? Kibud av va'em, honoring your mother and father. Gimilu chasadim, acts of loving kindness. Hashkamat Beit Hamidrash Shacharit va'aravit, visiting a house of study morning and evening, which probably also means to pray, right? It probably means both to study literally as well as to pray. Hachnasat orchim, a lot of us know that, of welcoming the guests, being hospitable, the hospitality that Abraham shows us in the Torah. Bikur cholim, visiting the sick. Hachnasat kala, the celebration with bride and groom. Uvayat hamet, to accompany the dead, right, to help bring them to their final resting place. As that's considered one of the highest mitzvot because it can't be reciprocated to us from the person, right? So accompanying the dead to their final resting place is one of the highest mitzvot. The iyun tefillah, so I guess that more concretely covers the prayer, right? We're studying in the morning and the evening, but we're also iyun tefillah. We're also trying to get to the essence of prayer, not just doing it for its own sake. V'hava'at shalom bein adam l'chavero, and bringing peace between human beings. And it also says uvein ish leishto, between man and wife, which I'm just discovering because that's a more traditional reading of the text. And even in the Reform prayer books that have this section, it's bein adam l'chavero. There's no ish and ishto. Which makes sense for a number of reasons, not the least of which is, as we know, it's a bit heteronormative, right? Couples are not necessarily a husband and wife. The Talmud Torah, the big kind of punchline, the Talmud Torah keneged kulam. The study of Torah is equal to them all. Not necessarily in its own right, but again, kind of the gist of this section of prayers is, the way it's often translated is, the study of Torah is equal to them all because it leads to them all. Right? So if you are studying Torah and engaging with it and doing what it guides you to do, then you're going to end up doing all of these things. But this is a very specific list that we come back to of the mitzvot. Okay. So we've selected passages from Torah to say thank you, God, for Torah, and we know that a whole lot of our words of prayer are from there. The bottom of 8 is Elohai Neshama, which really is a communal singing, usually singing way of saying what we said before with Modeh Ani, right? We're saying Elohai Neshama Shenatata Bi, the soul that you have given me, God, is pure. Right? So this idea that God has given us the soul to begin with, that's the source of our lives. But God also, again, restores the soul to us each morning when we wake up. Right? And so what we're saying is the soul is pure. What we end up doing with and to our soul over the course of the day, it might not keep it pure. But it's a reminder. It's really, it can be seen as a very refreshing way of today's a new day. Right? Today I can start over. At least I can start from the beginning today. I may not have had a great day yesterday, or maybe not even a great week. But today, God just put my soul back in me, and because God put it back in me, it's pure. What am I going to do with it, right? And there's lots of beautiful melodies to that. Okay, Stuart, we're finally at page 10 now. And page 10 we call the Nisim B'chol Yom, as a lot of you have heard me say, which literally means the miracles of every day. Nisim, like Nes Gadol Hayasham. Nisim means the miracles of every day. And what are the miracles of every day? Is it, the splitting of the water in my shower? No, the miracles of every day are I got up this morning, and here, by the way, is where a lot of these things are, at least according to the theory of my teacher, who I don't think is ever wrong. So I'm going to say, as far as I know, this makes perfect sense to me, that a lot of these blessings that we do rapid fire right in a row are connected to different things that we do. So the first one, Baruch atah asher natan lasechvi vina lahavchin bein yom uvein laila. So as you can see there, that's generally understood as giving to humanity, or giving to creature kind, if you will, the ability to know the difference between night and day. What I did learn is that literally the sechvi is a rooster. right? And that makes perfect sense, right? If the rooster is the one who's going to cock-a-doodle-doo and let you know that the sun is rising and that the morning has come, like it would make sense that the first blessing you go is, ah, thank God that the rooster knows what's up and can tell me when I should be waking up, right? They didn't, as far as I know, they didn't have iPhones to set alarms on, right? So the rooster becomes the nature's alarm clock. And so again, so that prayer is taken generally to mean the ability for us as human beings to distinguish between different things. But perhaps literally, it's thank God that the rooster knows what's going on because that helps wake me up in the morning. Um, okay. So the next three that we do on my notes were. Just see if I. The conservative movement added this to the Siddur in 1946. Um, they added these three things in a row. Sha'asani B'Tsalmo, for making me in God's image. Sha'asani Yisrael, for making me an Israelite, for making me a Jew. And Sha'asani Ben or Bat Chorin, right, which we know means someone who's free, right? The next ones after that seem to form a pattern, right? Pokeach Ivrim is opening the eyes of the blind. That would make sense when you wake up from sleep. You open your eyes and go, oh, Pokeach Ivrim. That's what God does, right? Malbish Arumim, who clothes the naked. As you are blessed and privileged to put on clothing in the morning, you're saying, thank God I have clothes, right? And thank God. So you're taking these things that are specifically what you are doing, and you're making it more general, right? More universal is the word I'm looking for, right? So as I'm clothing my naked self, I'm saying, God is amazing. God clothes all the naked, right? So you can see, again, this would help you remember, right? If the first thing you do is you open your eyes and you go, oh, okay, Achivrim, right? Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put on clothing. I'm going to thank God for that. And by the way, it's also likely the blessing we looked at before of Sheriat Sar about the pipes and the arteries and the veins and all working correctly. That's probably the blessing we said when we woke up in the morning and went to the bathroom, right? Of like, okay, I'd rather not start my day with this, but at least my body's working, right? At least I know this is how it's supposed to be. Then Matir Asurim, who frees the captive. That also may have been going to the bathroom, so to speak. Zokef Kifufim, who straightens, it says, well, I guess it says raises the down, right? Raises the downtrodden. Zokef Kifufim is kind of literally who straightens up the one who's bent down, who's kind of hunched over. So again, we can see as we're getting up and we're getting our energy and we're stretching out, and now I'm standing or sitting with a straight back, right? That's Zokef Kifufim. Rokaha Aretz al Hamayim, spreading the expanse over the universe. Shasali Kol Tzorki, who's given me everything I need, right? And I love that idea of, especially when we think about, thinking about all the resources that we have in the world, that, for example, we know there's enough food in the world to feed everybody, right? But what are we going to do to kind of make it, point us in that direction and try to make it a place where everybody is fed? But we're saying that, I have a meal. Thank God. God gave me the basic needs that I have. Hamechin mitzadei gaver, which literally means who prepares the steps of a man, right? As you start to walk forward and you're walking straight and you're not stumbling or falling down. Like, wow, that's a miracle too, right? Ozer Yisrael bigvura, right? To gird one in strength, right? To gird someone might be when they're putting on their belt, right? So you can see how each of these things is kind of matched with a very daily mundane thing that, again, gives us an appreciation of the things we take for granted, and also is then used to kind of universalize the powers of God, what God can do for all of humanity. Oter Yisrael b'tifara, same kind of thing, is to crown Israel with glory. That would make sense when I'm putting on my hat, right? If I'm starting my day and I'm getting dressed and I put my belt on second to last, I put my hat on last, and then I'm going out. That would make sense also. And Hanotain Laya'if Koach, the one who gives strength to the weary, to the tired, right? So that as you're walking out and you're going to shul or wherever you're going, you're probably tired, and you're saying, Okay, but I'm gonna ask God to help restore my strength. Um, so that is the Nisim B'chol Yom on 10. I just want to see if there's
Rabbi,
any.
how
Yes.
about the old Orthodox blessing that thank God I wasn't made a woman?
Yes. So I had where is it?
Has that been replaced by one of these?
Well, I think it's just not included. I think in Orthodox prayer book, some of them might still have that in there. For not making me, I had it somewhere. Oh, so the note I have on the screen from Ryan Bauer is that these three that were added in that we talked about of making me an image, um, made me free, made me knows relate, is directly related to the Hellenistic version, the Greek version. Grateful to fortune that I was born a person and not a beast, born a man and not a woman, and a Greek and not a barbarian. So it's possible that those three parts of this prayer were a direct response to a direct kind of polemic against what excuse me, what was happening in the culture around them. Um, and we know that this is the case for some of our prayers, as we'll probably come back to. We should come back to next week. That the prayers in the Shema and its blessings that we started to talk about, right? They have these. There's the first is about creation, right? And that was very likely a response to Zoroastrianism that said that there's a God of light and a God of darkness, and we're going, nope, just one God, right? And the prayer about love that I mentioned before is is a response to the Christians who said, you know, God's love is for us, and God loved us so much that He sent Jesus to die for our sins. And our tradition's going, God loves us so much, God gave us the Torah. That's how we know. And yeah, so it's possible that a number of our prayers are very relevant to their time and place and responding to what was happening around them or what was being said. So it does say, just having a little trouble reading. Yeah. So earlier earlier editions have for not making me a Gentile, for not making me a non-Jew, which is like double negatives. But then that was kind of changed to Israelite because there were church censors, as the note says. Okay, so
Rabbi,
and
why,
go ahead.
no, I'm sorry, you guys are very deep in this thing, so I'm more one-on-one. Why are we standing on this prayer?
I don't know.
Thank you.
I don't know. I mean, perhaps because it's the first prayers that we do together in our congregation, and
So
maybe
it's more of a
that's, you know.
custom than something that I would go to any synagogue and see.
My honest answer is I don't know. I really do. I don't want to give you a wrong answer.
All right, that's fine.
No, I want to see if my kids are here. Is anybody here? Do you
I
guys always stand when you do Nisim B'chol Yom? The Baruch Atah Adonai Melech Haolam, Asher Kishon, Malachim B'Yom U'Vein Laila. Okay, that's not helpful. Okay. That's I also got I don't know, so we'll see. I'm gonna ask my kids later when they daven at school, when they do the service, and they're doing these things. Maybe Jonah will be a helpful answerer there.
That's it. I wanted to know more, but because again, I'm more one-on-one.
No, it's a great question.
About conservative versus our specific shul and how those,
Yeah.
like, you start at page 10 and not the before, because that's the custom that was set by, from North Bergen or Cliffside Park or the rabbis there versus something I would see generally.
Yeah, in terms of the standing, I don't know. I'm gonna do some research because that's a good question. Having not kind of grown up with doing it regularly. I mean, and I'm familiar with the prayers even.
How'd you do the reform?
But,
You stood up on the reform?
I mean, Honestly, most Reform services, it's in the prayer book, but I would say that most places don't, not on Shabbat at least, maybe for the places that have weekday stuff.
Okay.
But I would bet that most Reform synagogues really aren't doing much of this. Most Reform synagogues are probably starting with a couple of opening songs kind of thing, and then really jumping right into Baruch. That's a little bit broad strokes, but that's probably,
I was just trying to get if there was any, kind of the rules of the road, but that's fine.
yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Harold, go ahead.
Yeah, Rabbi, I couldn't quickly grab an art scroll, but I did grab my childhood Siddur, which was a classic Orthodox Siddur from my bar mitzvah, the Stern one. So
Okay.
the three prayers, the first one was, who has not made me a heathen? The second one, who has not made me a bondman? And the third one, who has not made me a woman? Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shalom,
Asani, yeah.
osi,
Asani,
Asani Isha.
Isha, yep, yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, so framed in
And
the
then it goes on
negative.
to the rest, like you have here, blind, clothed, and naked, etc.
Yeah. So I think those were in a lot of Sidurim, those were eventually framed to be positive. But as you might imagine, the idea of thanking God either way for making me a man or not making me a woman might be offensive. It
Then,
might be
then they
offensive.
do have an insert. Women can say, "Who has made me according to thy will."
Yes, which feels a little bit backhanded to me, but it's I certainly wouldn't want to speak on anyone's behalf.
Just reporting the news.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I mean, because it would be interesting if there was for making me a woman, right? Which a lot of people, like more modern folks, some people do add that in there, right? And then if the men are saying, people identify as men are saying for making me a man, and women are saying for making me, then it's like, thank you for making me who I am. Like that works for me. But if it's either for making me a man or for making me according to thy will, it's like, I don't know.
It's the slap in the face.
I recall an explanation that blessing for not making me a woman is that I have more mitzvahs that I can do or that I'm supposed to do than women do, and I'm grateful for that.
Yes, I mean, and at the same time, the way I understand it is it's not that women are forbidden to do these other things. It's just that traditionally they're not expected to, they're not responsible for, right? So I think that's part of where I get tripped up of people saying women can't or shouldn't do these things instead of if you don't want to, you don't have to, but I have to, which I might have different kinds of challenges with, but it's still a different framing of then you're not allowed to and you cannot do this, right? I think that's where it gets a little bit problematic, at least for me. Okay, moving along, not at all briskly. Okay, so then the next few pages are there's personal thoughts and supplications. There's on page 12, there's this prayer called Le'olam, which then ends with Shema on so it's middle of page 12 is Le'olam according to our chart right around here. And really what I didn't know until kind of preparing for this is there's talk about the Akedah and about Korbanot, which are well, I don't think we have the section about Korbanot, but we do have mentioning of the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, on the bottom of 12 and 12 and 13, right? Bottom of 13. But we're your people, partners to your covenant, descendants of your beloved Abraham, to whom you made a pledge on Mount Moriah. We are the heirs of Isaac, his son bound up upon the altar. And so what this is doing, which was something I didn't know and learned, is we're saying we're paying homage to our tradition of bringing animal sacrifices. And we're saying we obviously can't do that anymore. And a conversation for another time is that, traditional Jews are praying for and hoping for and pining for the rebuilding of the temple, the third Beit HaMikdash. And if and when that happens, and some international laws change, we might be able to offer animal sacrifice, right? What we're doing is we're paying homage to that part of our tradition, And we're also saying, because we can't do that, we're kind of already starting from behind. Like we've already kind of gotten demerits because we're not able to fulfill these. So we're raising them in our prayers and in our conversation, so to speak, with God, because we don't do them. And also we're saying we're going to do all this extra praying because we're not able to do what the original commandment was. Okay. And then we have all kinds of, let me just see here. We're grateful for holiness on 14 and 15, rabbinic texts on loving kindness. So we get a few of those. Those cover the next number of pages. And then, oh, I went ahead a little bit. Okay. Page 19. Yes. So page 18 in the Hebrew, 19 in the English, in the Siddur, mentions what we call the 13 attributes of God, right? We just did Shlosh Hasar Midaya, right? The 13 attributes of God. Who knows 13? That's what 13 is. And so we are we're incorporating God's attributes and all the things that God does as we almost end this section, right? And the way we end the section is, what are you? Can we just get rid of that? Then we can actually see it. Okay. Oh, yeah, nothing newsworthy yet. Yes, thank you. So we have we do Kaddish de Rabbanan, which we usually don't do, but the Kaddish de Rabbanan is not necessarily for mourners, as it says in our Siddur. All who have read or who have heard the teaching of a text may participate fully. So this is something that is done in certain communities. We did it at HUC when we had a seminar or a learning session, like as a group, something like that. Oftentimes we would finish with and do Kaddish de Rabbanan together because we just studied something and how lucky we are to do that. And the idea of Kaddishes, no matter what you're doing, whether it's de Rabbanan or Chatzi or Yatom for mourners, Kaddish is basically a palate cleanser, right? It's like sorbet, right? It's when you get to the end of a section, you're saying the Kaddish, whichever kind of Kaddish you're doing, says we've done this section. This kind of brackets it and bookends it, right? And that's why we do the full the different Kaddishes at the end of like Torah service, at the end of each service, right? We're saying, okay, we're putting a bow on this section and we're moving on.
But we don't do it.
What?
We don't do it.
We don't. No, we usually from there we do our psalm for whichever day which is usually the psalm for Shabbat on 32 and 33.
That's what Errol says something, right?
Yes. No, that's usually Ira.
Oh, Ira.
Yes. Errol comes up and gets us to say hallelujah, which is great. But I just when Errol comes up and goes hallelujah, just like yes, there it is. So Ira usually does the psalm of the day, so to speak.
But we don't do the Kaddish, so we just go directly into the section. That's
Wait,
yeah.
okay.
We could do a Kaddish there, but we don't usually. So we have the psalm for the day, and that's pretty much it. So all of these psalms are there. We have psalm for Rosh Chodesh, and psalm for Days of Awe, psalm for House of Mourning, a couple of different options there.
Rabbi?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Traditionally, women don't say Kaddish. Do they say traditionally say Kaddish other than the mourner's Kaddish?
Also don't know. It probably depends on what community you're in.
Okay.
Right. So perhaps if there's modern Orthodox, minyanim, that women are encouraged to and are entitled to participate in certain things. I think a lot of that is the different sects.
Okay.
Within Orthodox and more traditional Judaism, and a lot of it might depend on the minhag hamakom, the customs of the place.
Okay, but generally Kaddish, whenever they occur, Kaddish is still in a traditional setting, perhaps not said by women.
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
Probably.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, wow.
Okay, and then we do more. So the reason, Stuart, why we don't do Kaddish to Rabbanan is because after we do that part and we read the psalm for the day, we do the mourner's Kaddish as a community, even though not everybody's saying that. By doing Kaddish Yatom on 52 and 53, that's the Kaddish that bookends this part. And
Okay,
it's already at 30, and I didn't even get to Pesukei de Zimra.
so that's the bookend. Okay.
Yes. I mean, I don't know that there's so much to say and dive into about Pesukei de Zimra. I can bring it up and we can do it real quick if you're okay with going over by just a couple of minutes.
Sure.
Let me just bring that up. There was definitely way more detail to go into on Birkot Shachar in my view, than the Pesukei de Zimra. Pesukei de Zimra is like we said, it's psalms of praise, verses of praise. And where did you go? Pesukei de Zimra. Okay, I'm gonna open you, and this is as you can imagine. These are different ways of praising God, right? So we have Baruch She'amar on page 53. We're blessing God as the one who says and does, right? Who speaks and brings things into being. You know, Stuart, it might be that when we begin a new section of prayer, that we rise. That would make sense to me, right? If the reason why we're standing for Nisim B'Kol Yom is because, at least for us, that's where the section of prayer begins. Because we do
So
it again.
a new section is, you think that's when so as you're going through the Siddur, I'll see that.
Yeah, I mean, because then it would make sense as to why we rise for this, why we rise for Baruch She'amar, right? Because we're now starting this second section of building up, and so therefore maybe it makes sense to stand up. Maybe it even came about because you're still counting the number of people you have with you, right? So that you stand up and you know how many people are there. It could be, right? Because you don't necessarily, at least my understanding is, you don't necessarily need a minyan to do these first two parts. I don't believe. You need a minyan in order to do Baruch Hu and to get into the Shema and its blessings, that next section. But you don't necessarily need a minyan depending on where you are, of course. You don't necessarily need a minyan to do these prayers. Okay, I'm gonna do one more screen share and we'll kind of fly through this and then we'll do some Q&A. Okay, just so many things on my screen, so many things. Okay, full screen. Okay, now I have to move people over here again so I can scroll down. Okay. So this section begins with Baruch She'amar, right? God who speaks things into being, and that's how it happened. I also like Baruch Gozer Kayim, the one who decrees and it becomes reality, right? And I'm guessing that there was some kind of connection between that and Gozer, the Gozerian from Ghostbusters, right? Choose the form of the destructor. But that's what we're doing there. And the blessing, Baruch Ata Ha'el Habar Hulal B'fi Amo Mishubach, right? Who is praised and who's lauded and who's and through these Ushirei David Avdecha, through these songs that David wrote, because they were attributed to David, the Psalms. We are praising you as the ruler of the universe and all these good things. So we get verses, as you see, verses with themes of praise. First Chronicles, Mizmor Letodah, Psalm of Thanksgiving, and it builds to the central piece, which is Ashrei, right? And we know Ashrei. Love Ashrei. That Ashrei begins with two verses from Psalm 84 and Psalm 144, but then goes into Psalm 145, which is alphabetical, right? Which again is it has to be another mnemonic device, right? Of this could be a lot to memorize and to remember, but if you are not literate and you don't have a Siddur in front of you and you can't read or write these things, if you know the Hebrew alphabet, in theory, you know what the prayers are, right? Because you know what the order is. So that's Ashrei as the central piece. More sections from Tanakh that are praiseworthy. We have we mentioned Micha Mocha here, even though we kind of jump ahead and we do Micha Mocha more fully. Well, we don't do it at all here. We do Micha Mocha when we do the Shema and its blessings, because that fulfills the theme of redemption. And so these are just all kinds of different verses from Psalms and from other places that speak to God's greatness, and now we are praising God. And it ends with Yishtabach, Shivcha La'ad Malkeinu, right? And that's really why Shochenad becomes so important, is because Shochenad is essentially, for lack of a better phrase, kind of the Kaddish of this section, right? So that's what brackets that. So Shochenad going into the last paragraph of Yishtabach Shimcha La'ad Malkeinu, that brings us to the end of the section. And from there is where we go to Kaddish, right?
I'm sorry, Rabbi. What page are we on?
Good question. So Yishtabach is or 338.
So
Wait,
we're
yes, it is. Right, because 336 is beginning of Shochenad, and then it goes on to 338, and Yishtabach Shimcha ends that section. And so since we just ended a section, now we do Chatzi Kaddish. Now we do that halfway through. Chatzi means halfway, even though it's definitely not halfway. But the Chatzi Kaddish is our palate cleanser on the end of that section before we go into Kriyat Shema, before we go into Shema and its blessings. So I went a little over time, but I did get to what I wanted to get to tonight. So I'm going to stop screen sharing, and please jump in with a question or a comment, and I will do my best to answer. But as you see, one of the things that is very, very important to me as a person, let alone as a rabbi, is I will not tell you things that are made up. If I don't know the answer, I will tell you that I don't know and that I will find out. But I never want to lead someone astray or give an answer that sometimes I might say, my inclination is, as you probably have heard me say, my inclination is this, my sense is this, but I'm not sure. But I'm never going to tell you something definitively that I am not definitive about. So let's see if there's questions or comments. Yes.
I have a comment.
Okay. Errol, then Herschel.
I have a comment going back to the beginning of this conversation.
Do you want me to start over? I can start over.
No. I remember as a child learning a nursery rhyme. Now I lay me down to sleep. And that starts off that whole scenario of waking up in the morning.
Right, now I lay me down, I pray the Lord my soul to keep.
If I could die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take.
Yeah,
and then waking up in the morning and completing that transition.
Exactly. Because at night we're doing this when we say Hashkivenu, right? At night we're saying exactly what you just said, just less cute, right? We're saying it's nighttime. We're going to lie down to sleep and we're going to be vulnerable. Please protect us while we're sleeping and guard my soul, right? So it's exactly where that comes from. That's a similar idea, I think, between Judaism and traditional Christianity, for sure.
Okay.
For sure. Harold, Heschel.
Sorry, just a minor observation you don't have to comment on, but I was looking at the acrostic in Ashrei, and
Yeah.
there's no line for nun.
There's no nun.
It goes Lamed Mem Samach.
Yep. So it's another one of these great mysteries and great questions that has different interpretations and different answers to it as to why there's no nun. I think I might have actually shared before that there's the idea of, there's nothing so whole as something that's broken or something that's missing something, right? So maybe there's something about Um, and maybe there's something about when you're missing one little piece and you notice it, right? That it makes you appreciate or makes you more conscious of, more aware of everything else that's great, right? This is going to sound silly, but it's like when I go to Fish concerts and they are the most ridiculously, unbelievably talented musicians, and every so often they miss something, they flub a note, I almost enjoy it when it happens because then I realize they're getting it right 99.99% of the time, right? They flub that note, they mess that up. You know what? A, they're human. And it's good for me to not take them for granted. And B, now I'm going, oh, wow. But the rest of it was amazing, minus that one note or that chord or whatever it was, right? Another explanation that I like is Nun is 50, and 50 would be the Jubilee, right? So maybe there's something about, the Jubilee year, right? The Yovel every 50 years, right? And that's because as some of you might know, right? We have the sabbatical year every 7 years, and then every 7 cycles of that is 49, and then the 50th is the Jubilee year, this super awesome party reset of everything, recalibration of everything. So maybe it was left out because it's like a tip of the cap to the Jubilee and kind of resetting. That's probably a little bit more of a creative stretch, but I like that. So as far as I know, that's another one of those things where it just is, and we try to explain it, but we're probably never really going to know what the definitive answer is. It could be just as simple as whoever was writing it just skipped ahead. I don't know.
Maybe he didn't know his alphabet.
Yeah, maybe, or I don't know. Maybe the rain came down and washed that line away somehow, and I don't know. I don't know. But yes, there's no line for Nun. I think I might have shared with you that what the like Caleb and the younger kids, when they do Ashrei, you stand on the line that begins with the same letter as your name, right? So Caleb will stand up and lead the Kaf line, right? Whatever that is. Kavod, I don't know, Kavod Malchuto. I think that's cute. That's kind of a fun way to just say, like, look, guys, it's an alphabetical order. It's pretty great. Other questions?
Just a quick observation. Thinking about why we stand for the initial lines about praising God. I can't imagine not standing if I'm giving praise. It just seems so honorary and so holy to praise God for all those things that just are so important. It just seems like it requires one to stand.
I hear that. I guess I also struggle with there's so much of our prayers that are praising God, right? So then what kind of differentiates? But I also like the idea of, right, and we'll talk more about this with the Amidah, that traditionally speaking, there's 3 steps backward, 3 steps forward, because you're approaching a king or a queen, you're approaching royalty, right? So maybe there's something about in each of these sections, I want to put my best foot forward, right? I want to start strong. So I'm going to stand up and say, this is the beginning of a section. This is important. Yay, God, right? And I want everybody to be there with me. And if I'm standing, I'm probably more likely to say it with more energy, maybe with more focus, than if I'm just like, right? Like, right? Like it's like, no. I'm standing at attention literally for this. Yeah. Okay. Well, I appreciate you sticking with me, as I know I went over time, but I wanted to make sure we got through these 2 parts together. And next week we're going to do the next 2 sections, which are Shema and its blessings, and then what we call the Amidah, right? Kind of the really the central part of what we're praying. Any other thoughts or comments or questions before we go?
I just have a thought. I'm so grateful that our shul starts at 10 a.m. because for most of my years of going to shul, I've never had the opportunity to say those early prayers. And because you start at 10, I'm enjoying them early. So thanks very much, at 10 rather than at 9.
Sure. I mean, I inherited that. That wasn't up to me, but I'm happy about that for sure. All right. Well, thank
you
you all
very
for
much.
joining.
Definitely.
Thanks. All right, Lila Tov, everybody. Have a good night.
Right, good night.
Bye.